Hello, and welcome to Send with Coffee and Boxing Gloves. I'm Kelly, a Send parent, and this podcast is a space where we talk honestly about life in the world of special educational needs and disabilities. If you're a parent navigating EHCPs, school meetings, assessments, or just trying to make sense of the system, you're definitely not alone. In this podcast, we'll talk about the real experiences of Send parenting, the challenges, the frustrations, the victories, and everything in between. Today's episode is called How I Joined the World of Send Parenting, and I'm sharing my own story about how this journey began for us and why I decided to start this podcast. So grab a coffee, take a breath, and let's get into it. So, firstly, I will say this. If you're expecting a very well polished podcast, this is not it. It's me with a microphone and a recording app and a bell for the boxing. Um, so it's not going to be highly polished. It is what it is, because I think the information that's in it is more important than making it seem really fancy or anything. So why the name? So Send with Coffee and Boxing Gloves. Basically just the coffee kind of, I mean, I live on it, but also it represents, the exhaustion and burnout that parent carers have, or any carer, that, the stress, the long nights, being in survival mode, because it is exhausting. It absolutely is. And if you're not a Send parent, you're never really going to completely understand the levels of exhaustion that a lot of Send parents live with. And then the boxing gloves is very much because you have to fight everybody. So even for things like EHCPs, DLA, which we'll go into in later episodes, you have to fight to get it. And especially with DHCP, that's a legal document. There are laws around that, and yet still you have to fight to get that. So it is definitely, a fight, hence coffee and boxing gloves. And I just thought, if I can help just one parent to feel less alone, then I've done what I wanted to do. So our story is myself and my husband Rob. We have Jessie, who is 6.5 now, and we started this journey when she was about 3, maybe just over 3. She is our only child, and obviously with her age, we went through COVID lockdowns, and she was about 8, 9 months old, I think, when the first lockdown started. So, you miss out on a lot of things. We used to take her swimming once a week when she was a baby. And then obviously, health visitors weren't visiting, things like that. And eventually we did have a health visitor come round. And Rob and I were both working at the time. And Jessie went to a childminder and also to preschool as well. Big shout out to the childminder. I'm not going to be naming people in this, just what their job titles are, but we're still friends with the childminder because she's an amazing person. So it was actually the childminder that mentioned first of all about disability living allowance, so DLA, which is a benefit for disabled people under 16. And she said about it, have you thought about applying for this? Because Jessie was still non-verbal at this point. She never kind of played with toys or anything, just sort of liked lining things up. Um, so there was talk about potentially autism, but yeah, the childminder mentioned about the DLA, and I was a bit like, okay, because I think I was living a little bit in kind of denial in a way. Um, and then preschool sorted out the referral into the community pediatrics team at the hospital. Um, they were so good with that. Again, like two amazing women work there. Um, they know who they are. Um, and yeah, they did the referral in because we were pretty sure she was autistic. Um, but it was obviously we kind of needed to get a diagnosis, so that was put through. And then they also started the process for the EHCP, because Jessie was due to start school not long after she turned 4, just because of obviously how her birthday fell. And they were like, yeah, we're going to need to do this. And during this time, I gave up work. Um, I'd worked for the same company for like 18 years, and I was doing a lot of traveling, um, for work. I mean, I loved my job, but I just couldn't quite cope with it anymore. And with Jess's needs becoming more and more apparent, it was going to be a few months off just to see. Um, and yeah, that was like 3 years ago. So it's been a big change, and again, that's something else I'll talk about in another episode about the isolation and the loss of identity and things like that, we and the grief as well. But also, like I say, this podcast, I'm not sugarcoating things. This is real life. This is real life, real feelings. So we ended up, Rob's parents, so Jessie's grandparents, paid for a private autism assessment. And it was this doctor who came to the house, did the ADOS assessment with her. Obviously, she wasn't interacting with him, there was a lot. And he went off, and then I think it was a week or two later, we got the report confirming that he was diagnosing her with autism. So by that point, I knew it was coming, but it was still a shock, which I realise sounds quite silly in that you've got a gut feeling about this, but I think seeing it in black and white, because in that very moment, I didn't know what the future was going to be. Because every parent, they do it, don't they, where they imagine, what they'll be doing with their kids, in summer holidays, or, going away on holiday, or, being able to do things like baking and, snuggling down and watching a Disney movie together, and all of that just goes because you have no idea. You have no idea what's going to happen. So we had that, and then it was only a couple of months later. I think we only waited, I think it was about 8 or 9 months in the end. But then we are talking like 3 years ago, for the appointment at the hospital. So we went for that, met the consultant. Again, oh my God, another wonderful woman. She is lovely. Um, and we got in there, and I was expecting her to, ask a lot of questions. And I was expecting her to say, right, we'll do this ADOS assessment, which is what they do, obviously, for a diagnosis. And it was a really hot day. She had the window open, but the radiators were still on because apparently that's a thing in hospitals. And we ended up sort of sat there. Jessie got sort of a little bit upset. She was kind of fed up of being in the room, which I completely understand because it was so hot. So Rob took her back out into the waiting room, and the consultant pediatrician, she just said she's autistic, and that was it. That was our diagnosis from the NHS. And then because Jessie didn't and still does not sleep through the night, obviously you can have melatonin for children. And I'd already decided I was not leaving that room until I had a prescription for melatonin. But luckily, one of my friends, um, who has an autistic child herself, had told me to go prepared with a sleep diary. So I'd gone with a 2 week sleep diary that literally showed what time she went to sleep, what time she was up, if she napped during the day, all of that. So I had that 2 week sleep diary, and I said, "Luke, can we get melatonin, please?" And she sort of glanced over it and she's like, "Yes." So that was it. We got the melatonin, and I'd seen on a lot of like send groups, which you join, don't you? You find a send group and you join it, and it's a supportive community, I've found. So there's a lot of parents saying about, I've got melatonin, it's just not worked. And it was in the back of my mind, really hope that's not going to be us. Turns out that's us. So for some children it works amazingly well. Like, I've seen parents that are like, "Oh my god, we literally slept through the night for the first time in years from the melatonin." But we've tried different doses, we've tried different ways of her having it, and it just isn't working for her. So it's clearly not a thing that works for her. But we had that, and then we had the NHS diagnosis, and then it was the EHCP, and that was such a fight, which I'm going to go into detail on a different episode about exactly what was involved in the fight. But to get from the EHCP needs assessment to Jessie getting her place in an independent specialist school, that was two years, I think. So it was a long fight. It was a long fight. But like I say, I'll go into more detail with that, because there are some things that I'm quite proud of that I did during that, and some things that I chuckle at. Um, so yeah, and then the DLA, they first said that we would get medium rate care, and I was like, she's up like most of the night, and I'd already done a lot of kind of research around it before applying. And again, I'll go into more detail in another episode, but one of the best things I was told from having done research, because I was like, I need to find out about this, was to print the forms off the website but call up for the form, because when you ring up for the form, they stamp it with a date and then post it to you. So as long as you get that back within a certain time frame, which I think is a month, not 100% sure, I'll double check so it's right on the next episode that I do on that. So with that, it gives you time while you're waiting for the form to come through to fill it out, because that is not a fun form. And a lot of the forms, so the community paediatrician referral, the HCP referral, DLA application, you have to talk about your child in a negative. And we're not wired that way. We're not. So you have to say every single negative thing that your child does. And again, there's no sugarcoating. I was sobbing so much because I felt like the worst parent in the world for saying all these things my child cannot do. And I'm also carrying a different type of grief, because I don't know if she's ever going to do these things. I don't know if she's ever going to talk. I don't know if I'm ever going to hear her say mummy. I don't know what her later years are going to be like. So it is really, really tough. I spent a lot of time crying. And again, I found that my car was my safe space. So I would take her to preschool, and I would drive home. It was only like a few miles away anyway, it wasn't even that far. But I would then come home, and on my way, I would be crying. That's the cat. If you can, if my microphone's picking that up, that's the cat. Like I said, this is not going to be a professional job. Um, but I'd be crying in the car, or I'd play songs to kind of shout along to rather than sing. Not that I can sing anyway, because my singing is horrendous. But that was kind of a little bit of a therapy for me, and you know, I'd sing along, or I'd cry, or I'd shout, or I'd just tell the world where to go. Um, so that was kind of my safe space, and I needed that because it is absolutely exhausting. Um, and even now, after all those fights, and Jessie does now go to a special school, which is actually in the next county, but it's only about 20 miles away, so it's not far. And I do the school run, so I take her and I pick her up, um, and that's obviously what we do. And I won't put her in a taxi. There's lovely taxi drivers out there, I know there are, because I talked to some of them at the school gate. But she's non-verbal, and I'm her carer, so why wouldn't I take her to school? But going back, I've just realised I was talking about DLA and then I've sidetracked, which that's going to happen a lot on this as well. So you might have to replay just to try and follow what's going on, because there's no kind of set thing on this. But yeah, the DLA, they came back and they were like medium rate care. And she was only eligible for high rate mobility at that age, not low rate mobility, which kicks in at 5. And I was like, well, that's not right. I read all the criteria and everything. I'm like, that's not right. So I did the first step of appealing their decision, which is called mandatory reconsideration, or an MR. And I sent all the information off, and it came back eventually, because I think it was in November we applied. It was about March, I think they made their decision on it, and then it was May or June, I think I got the result from the MR, which was that based on all the evidence that I had, which again I'll go into on the DLA episode, what sort of evidence we had and everything. I got a letter through, and Jessie was bouncing on the trampoline in the garden, and this letter came through, and it's from DWP, because obviously it's from Belfast on the back. I was like, oh my god, it's DWP. So I opened it, and I'm like scanning this first page of this letter, and I flip it over and I'm scanning it, and I'm stood outside in the garden with Jessie, and I'm scanning it. I'm like, well, what is it? What is it? And they'd actually changed it to high rate care and high rate mobility. And then I literally just sort of sank to the ground of like, oh my god, like they listened. And then I checked the front page, and there was one line on there, and it said, we've changed our decision. But I'd completely missed that. So if I'd read that, I'd been like, oh, okay. But just in my panic of, was it worth it? But like I said, we'll go into that into a further episode, with more kind of nitty gritty around it, what sort of evidence we had, etc., etc. But I just wanted to, start this podcast just because I'd like to think it will help people. The main thing is just not feeling alone. And I know there's a lot of content creators out there for, various things, autisms, SEND, etc. and they do videos, and they have their child around and everything. I didn't want to do that because personally I do have photos of Jessie on my personal Facebook page, but I don't want to be putting her out there in the world when she can't tell me if she wants to or not. So that's why it is very, I'm not going to be naming names of anything apart from obviously myself, Rob, and Jessie. There's not going to be people named. It's going to be job roles, or, for example, when I talk about school, it's school. So, I'll talk about mainstream school and then I'll talk about special school. So that's how, it's going to be. Um, so, yeah, there's a lot of content coming. Um, so I would definitely say, if you like the episode and you want to follow, like and subscribe or share with another SEN parent that you think might enjoy it. The episode lengths will vary, and as I've already said, not going to be a professionally polished one. But that's basically our journey, and we will continue it next time. So I will say thank you for listening to Send with Coffee and Boxing Gloves, and I will see you again really soon.